It's time for a wrap-up video, and in today's video I'm going to be wrapping up not only October, but also I need to go back and wrap up September. But don't worry, it's not a super long video covering a lot of books because I've already talked about most of the books that I read in September and October. I read 14 books in September, specifically 11 fiction and 3 nonfiction. But I've already discussed 9 of those 14 books with you in videos like Tudor Timber and Octimber and Historathon Pile of Possibilities. And then in October, I read 17 books. 11 fiction and 6 nonfiction. And again, I covered all but 5 of them in other videos. Actually, one of those 5 I have talked to you about, but it's so good I want to mention it again today. But yes, I covered those books in my Historathon Pile of Possibilities video, my Fall Food Books video, and coming up very soon, I'll be covering 6 of them in my Mary Stewart wrap-up video. But still, altogether, I've got 10 books I want to share with you today that I read in September and October that I loved. And I really think a lot of you would love too. So the 5 books from September I want to share are 3 science fiction, 1 time travel, and 1 historical mystery. The first science fiction book is All Systems Red, number 1 in the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. Now, most everyone has already heard of the Murderbot Diaries. I am very much late to this party. But this series, 8 books so far, well, the 8th, Platform Decay, is coming out in May of 2026. All Systems Red won the Hugo, the Locus, and the Nebula Award for Best Novella, and deservedly so. It's just a fantastic read. I can't believe I put it off for so long. I loved it so much that I went to the library and got all the other ones already. That's how much I want to binge it very soon. So what's this series about? In a corporate-dominated spacefaring future, planetary missions must be approved and supplied by the company. Exploratory teams are accompanied by company-supplied security androids for their own safety. Of course, in a society where contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder, safety is not exactly a primary concern. On a distant planet, a team of scientists are conducting surface tests, shadowed by their company-supplied droid, a self-aware security unit that has hacked its own governor module and refers to itself, though never out loud, as Murderbot. And there's a reason for that, which you slowly over the course of the book come to discover the history of this android and how it is developed into what it is today, which it's still trying to figure out itself. In fact, what this Murderbot android wants most of all is to be left alone, but it can't help slowly forming some bonds with its humans. So when a neighboring mission goes dark, it's up to the scientists and their Murderbot to figure out what exactly is the truth. The next science fiction book is Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. Now, I would read you the synopsis for this book because it's definitely what drew me to it. Because this is a book I never would have picked up on my own, and I probably wouldn't have believed recommendations, even from my closest friends and family, about this book being one that I would like. Because on the surface, on paper, it definitely is not a book I would like. But the synopsis really drew me in. The reason I won't read it to you, though, is it's kind of spoilery, and I don't want to spoil you. But I'll do my best to read in and around it and put in my own commentary, too. Spaceships aren't programmed to seek revenge, but in this instance, Demeter will make an exception. So Demeter is the sentient AI that runs a space shuttle ship, shuttling humans from Earth to Alpha Centauri. The only problem is all the humans keep dying. And Demeter really wants to figure out why that is. It shouldn't be happening, and it's damaging to his reputation. Now his medical AI, Steward, is sure it's because of equipment failures. But Demeter's not believing that. In fact, pretty soon he figures out there's a paranormal element involved, hard as it is to believe. And this leads to all sorts of crazy, quirky situations and characters. And just when I thought I'd figured this book out, it would throw another twist in and another really weird character. I mean, it was pretty over the top, but yet fun and somehow believable. Barbara Truelove did a really good job with this book. Now, there are two human characters that play a pretty big role, especially one of them, but all the others are sort of not exactly human, let's say. So can I just say this was hilarious? It was also on occasion violent and slightly gory, but not too much because I couldn't handle that. Just a really enjoyable read, actually, and I'm looking forward to finding if Barbara Truelove has written anything else. I will still be hesitant and a little worried about going into one of her novels, but I will try them because I like this one so much. Now, this synopsis closes out by saying, the queer love child of pulp horror and classic sci-fi, of monsters and mainframes, is a dazzling, heartfelt odyssey that probes what it means to be one of society's monsters and explores the many types of friendships that make us human. Yeah, that actually is very true. I stand by whoever wrote that part of the synopsis there. And I'll add that this is the book that made me want to go out and explore other sci-fi books that feature sentient AIs. Now, the third sci-fi book I read in September was by Adrian Tchaikovsky, Children of Time. And the reason I read this book, even though it was very thick, and I actually was also afraid to read this one because I heard it was full of spiders. They were the aliens in this book. And I was like, I'm not sure that will go over well with me. But I had to read it because I wanted to get to book 2 in the series. And book 2, Children of Ruin, I did read and already talked about with you because I read it for October, which was a reading event all about octopuses and actually all cephalopods in September. And book 2 in this series is about aliens that are octopuses. But I didn't want to read it out of order, so I had to read Children of Time first. And so I did, and guess what? I really enjoyed it. It was a long read, and it was slow in certain parts, but it was well worth it. I really did enjoy the character development, both for the humans and for the spider aliens. And I loved the ending as well, which I didn't think I was going to, but yeah, it kind of surprised me, and I really liked it. I actually like book 1 much better than book 2. So there you go. Then the fourth book from September I want to share with you is Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle. Now, this is a time travel book, but it's also an alternative history book. And it actually won Best Alternate History Award from the Dragon Awards in 2023. And I can see why. Now, this book has some mixed reviews. Some people praise it highly. Others are like, it was way too confusing, or it had a false promise as to what it was going to be about in some synopses you read. I get where they're coming from because a lot of what I read about this book ahead of time, not reviews, I didn't want to get spoiled, but a lot of different synopses I read here and there talked about the fact that this man, this scientist, ends up 200 million years in the past in kind of a Jurassic Park setting. And how's he going to survive amongst all the dinosaurs and such? And it's not that that's not in the book. It's just that that is not a major part of the book. So that's what people mean when they say false promises. They thought the whole book was going to be about that, and it's not. What this book is about is a father and daughter, he being a scientist inventor, Dr. Sam Anderson, and his teenage daughter. I believe she was in her mid-teens when it started, Adeline. And the inciting incident happens almost immediately when the book starts, and that is that Dr. Anderson and his daughter Adeline are accused of murdering, in fact, his girlfriend. And what happens is Dr. Anderson decides he's going to have to confess so that his daughter won't get punished, because this is many years in the future. And in the future, major criminals like murderers, they're not put in jail. They're not even executed. They are sent through a time machine long into the past, 200 million years in the past, in fact. What's ironic is that Dr. Anderson is one of the people that actually invented this time machine. So yes, what happens then is that Adeline, knowing that she didn't commit the murder and fully believing her father didn't commit the murder, decides she's going to get him back and prove his innocence. Both of which things are pretty much impossible. But she has the help of his close friends who were part of the scientific team that developed this machine to begin with. Only thing is, she discovers that these friends all have some very, very deep, dark secrets, and she's not sure who she can exactly trust. So this is a twisty, turny, totally crazy, quirky time travel alternate history book, and I was all there for it. Even the ending, which was, again, another change in setting and change in tone. And yeah, I'm going to be ready to look for other books by A.G. Riddle. This one is a standalone, but he's written a lot of others, so I'm going to go researching those next. The fifth and final book from September I want to share with you is a historical mystery, and this is the Tate and Bell Mysteries by Irina Shapiro. There's 7 books in the series. Well, the 7th is coming out in March of 26. And book number 1 is called The Highgate Cemetery Murder. Now, this series features Gemma and Sebastian. So Sebastian Bell is a police detective with a very haunting past. His wife and unborn son were brutally murdered in retribution for one of the crimes he was trying to solve. And he's never been the same since, obviously. In fact, he got into opium. He was very much addicted to opium, barely keeping his job. But he has finally come through that and is starting to get on his feet again, starting to work again. And he gets assigned to solve a case of a highborn heiress who was murdered and put on display in the cemetery. Now, the way Gemma comes into it is she is a nurse, working privately now, but having recently returned from the Crimea. And that war had a real serious effect on her. You know, it's changed her outlook on life, as it would do. She is living with her brother, Victor, and Victor is the one who stumbles upon the body of this heiress. This all happens at the very beginning of the book, and right away, Victor ends up dead as well, seemingly from an accident, but Gemma's not convinced. She thinks it was murder, but something to do with the woman he found, and perhaps the murderer thought he had seen something and they wanted to keep him quiet. So Gemma gets in contact with the detective to find out what happened to her brother. She wants justice for him. The detective, of course, doesn't want her to have anything to do with this, but soon he realizes she actually has information probably that could help him, because it turns out that these murders are all related to the Crimean War, and she has firsthand knowledge of that and the people who were there. This is such a well-written mystery series. It isn't exactly cozy, though, because it does depict the crimes sort of graphically. And there's a sub-character involved, a friend of Sebastian's who is the police coroner, so we do see some post-mortems taking place. And as I mentioned in my recent Cozy Mystery Series video, these types of mysteries also probably should not be considered cozy because of the victims. The nature of the victims is that they're usually innocents. Not someone who, in contemporary fluffy or cozy mysteries, that the town hated, that was a bully or that was taking advantage of people. No, these are usually young women who really hadn't done much of anything wrong, if anything. Sometimes they're very poor people or prostitutes, even children. These books don't generally dwell on them except in the sense of trying to solve the mystery, but the fact is, it's showing you a grittier side of life, and the focus is on bringing the killers to justice. I thought that Irina Shapiro does a wonderful job. Her writing is top-notch, and I'm definitely continuing this series. And now the 5 books I want to share with you that I read in October that I haven't covered elsewhere, except the first one. The first one is the Moonwind Mysteries, and book number 1 is The Night Raven. This is by Johan Rundberg. It was originally published in Swedish. It's translated by AA Prime, and this series, 3 books so far, I believe there's a 4th one out in Sweden already. It's won all sorts of awards there, and I can see why. It's extremely well written, very much a page turner. The setting is so immersive and authentic, and the characters are wonderful, both in the depiction of them, they feel so real, and also in the relationships that are starting to develop between them. So this is all about Mika, a 12-year-old orphan living in an orphanage there in Stockholm, Sweden in 1880. She's been given a lot of responsibility over the years, and she's a very smart, very observant young woman. So, and I say young woman even though she's 12 because she is so mature already. So it is the middle of freezing winter there in Stockholm, and you can imagine it's even more freezing at this poor orphanage where they can't keep the fires going. They have no money for food almost. The children are on the brink of starvation, and Mika and the others are basically just trying to survive this winter. And one night, someone comes to the door and leaves a newborn baby. And this leads to Mika realizing something more sinister is going on than just the abandonment of a child, which is bad enough. And when the police come to investigate and her observations are relayed to the detective in charge, he immediately realizes that she is gifted and could perhaps help him to solve another mystery he's working on. So Detective Hoff recruits Mika, and they make a wonderful, interesting pair. I'm really enjoying, just in the first book alone, the evolution of their relationship. And very quickly, they realize there's a connection between the murder he's working on and this baby. And soon, Mika and Detective Hoff begin to realize that perhaps the Night Raven, a serial killer who was caught and executed previously, might actually still be alive. And as the murders mount, Mika and the detective realize they need to solve this mystery now. If you like a good historical mystery, I guarantee you're going to like the Moonwind Mysteries, so give them a try. The second book I want to share with you from October is another historical mystery. It's set in 1848 in California, just as the gold rush is starting to happen. And it is an unusual cozy mystery. In fact, I almost didn't cover it here. I almost saved it to put in the video I'm doing in December all about cozy mysteries with really unusual themes. So what is the theme of this one? Well, the setting is kind of unique, the California Gold Rush, San Francisco. But the theme is steampunk. Book number 1 is Steam and Sensibility. This is by Kirsten Weiss, and I've read a few other more regular cozy mysteries by this author, and she's a great writer. I think this one's independently published, and I will say there were a couple of editing issues within it, or formatting rather. But other than that, top-notch book. Very strange though, very quirky. The steampunk? Yes. So the main character is Sensibility Gray. Now, she has just come over from Britain. She lived there with her father, who was a scientist and an inventor. Remember, this is just the beginning of steam technology. And she gets sent over when her father unexpectedly dies. Her uncle lives in San Francisco, and apparently he's agreed to take her in. When she arrives, he's nowhere to be found, though. But she's a very capable person. She's very independent-minded, and she is very smart. She's an inventor like her father was. She's always creating little automatons out of random stuff she finds, and it's very curious to read about. I thought the setting was pretty well done here. Having read and studied a lot of California history, I was kind of impressed that she included the Mexicans owning land and the Californios there. Yeah, it was pretty well done. I thought, though, that it was also, like I said, a little crazy. There's many characters in here. There's secret societies, and they're stalking her, and she knows it has something to do with her father's journal, but what exactly, she's not sure. And this is an ongoing series. There's 4 in it so far, and I definitely will continue because I have to figure out what's going on here. The next book is another historical mystery, and it is book number 2 in the Tate and Bell mystery series. And this one is called Murder at Trader's Gate. So Gemma had to leave her private nursing job for reasons you discover in the first book. And now she's working at the Foundling Hospital, basically an orphanage. And she's very attached already to one of the children there, Lucy, which, you know, my hope is that somewhere along the way she gets to adopt Lucy, but I bet that doesn't happen. I'm trying to prepare myself. Anyway, this book's murderer is a journalist. He was the one who actually covered Gemma's brother Victor's murder and the heiress who was murdered and displayed at the cemetery in book 1. He covered all of that. He also used to cover a lot of the Crimean War. And when he is murdered, it turns out that his murder is related somehow to something that happened back in the Crimean War. And they know this because shortly after he's murdered, someone else who was in the Crimea at the same time as them is also murdered. So Sebastian Bell, the detective, needs Gemma's input again, but also is extremely worried she might be next on the list. Once again, I enjoyed this book very much. Irina Shapiro is a great author. For what she's doing, she really does her job well. I mean, she has that setting down pat. Victorian London, the reality of it. Now, this is not the upper class Victorian London. It is the middle, and lower class that we're seeing. And I'm really enjoying the exploration of the society and Gemma and Sebastian's evolving relationship as they both are dealing with a lot of grief and developing also a good, strong friendship. And maybe more? The fourth book from October that I want to share with you is one I absolutely love. Definitely a high 5-star from me. By Linda Sue Park, we have Prairie Lotus. Now, I'm going to be doing a video all about Linda Sue Park and the other books she's written as well, sometime in November or December. She is a new favorite author of mine. Let's say that for sure. What I really enjoyed about this book is one of my favorite authors in series when I was younger, as a child and as a young mother reading aloud to my children, were the Little House series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. However, when reading them, I always did have a few little issues with certain parts of those books, specifically with how Caroline, the mother, was portrayed as viewing the Native Americans. There were one or two other issues in the later books, but it was the main issue I had. However, in most regards, those books are such a wonderful representation of the pioneer life and the resilience and determination those pioneers had, and just an honest portrayal of the childhood of those pioneers. And a very cozy, comforting read for those of us who enjoyed it as children. But though I can't be blind to its flaws, I also can't just abandon it. And this book comes in perfectly to be a companion read because this counterbalances the negative portrayal of the American Indians in that book, or rather the negative portrayal of one of the most beloved character, Ma's, attitude toward those Native Americans. In this book, we have Hannah, a 14-year-old, half Asian, half white young girl. And I say half Asian because I don't want to give you any spoilers. You'll find out more about her background when you read the book. But this book presents not just what it was like for Asians in America during the middle of the 19th century, but also the American Indians, because Hannah has contact with some Sioux Indians as she and her father move into Dakota territory. This book does a fabulous job, or I should say Linda Sue Park does a fabulous job in showing us how the people who weren't white were treated by the majority, not all, but the majority of the white settlers. And yet it's done in that same cozy, comforting way that the bulk of the Little House books were done. The food is there, the family traditions are there, the schoolhouse and the, nurturing teacher is there. It was just wonderful in so many ways. In fact, there was only one thing about this book that I found I would have wanted to change a bit. And that was the way that her father was presented. He was presented a little bit too negative for me. Like, I have no problem with presenting flaws of characters, but I felt like it was just a little bit too much and not necessary. Otherwise, I thought this book was basically perfect for what it was trying to do. Linda Sue Park was very upfront in saying why she wrote this book and what she was aiming for, and I feel like she's really accomplished that. Let me read you one excerpt from the book right in the beginning. Now, most of the book is not making a direct political statement of any kind, but it's the underlying ways of thinking that are addressed here. For instance, here's Pa talking to Hannah. Most of the land around here used to be part of the Great Sioux Reservation, and they left it as it was, all wild and unfarmed, so why shouldn't folks settle there? The land ought to go to people who work to improve it. That means farming and railroads and businesses, churches and schools. You want those things, right? You got to have somewhere to build them. Hannah did want those things. She especially wanted to go to school. She wondered why it wasn't possible for whites and Indians to share the land somehow. But she already knew from living in California that most white people didn't like having neighbors, Chinese, Indians, Mexicans, who weren't white themselves. So that's just some passing thinking on the part of Hannah. As someone who's half Asian and half white, she's having to deal constantly throughout her entire life with the way people see her and treat her. And it's been very difficult. And I'm really impressed with her overall positive spirit and kind nature, and yet also her determination to see justice done and people treated well. It was just a great book. It really, really was. So the fifth and last book from October that I want to share with you is a nonfiction called 9 Gates, Entering the Mind of Poetry, essays by Jane Hirschfield. One of the blurbs on the back of this book says, with the exactitude of a surgeon and the sensuous attention of a chef, Hirschfield addresses, essay by essay, the art, craft, and act of making poetry. Ultimately a philosophic text in that Hirschfield examines aspects of being, knowing, and meaning, these essays are brilliantly ambitious and confidently clear. So it is really just what it says, 9 gates, 9 ways of entering into poetry. Not necessarily to understand the poetry you read because, well, you often won't understand it. Certainly not every time you read a poem. But more about experiencing the poetry. And so 9 different ways, yeah. For instance, the first chapter is Poetry in the Mind of Concentration. The second, the question of originality. The third, the world is large and full of noises, thoughts on translation. And so it goes. Now, I read this book in full in October. However, what I want to do now is go back and very slowly reread it, 1 chapter a month. And then I would like to do a video on that chapter along with reading aloud some poetry that is already now in the public domain to sort of highlight what that chapter was focusing on. Because I'm finding this very enjoyable, very eye-opening, just a real joy to read. And if you love poetry or you just want to start to get into poetry, maybe explore it a little bit, I highly suggest picking up this book. Now, the chapters, the essays that Jane Hirschfield has written here, they're not superficial, lightweight, and fluffy. They require you to well, concentrate. But they are written in sections, so you don't need to read the whole chapter at one time. You can read a little bit and think about it, ponder it. And that's what I'm going to do coming up throughout, well, the next 9 months. Wow, I did not realize just how much the sun had changed and was such a glare on me. Sorry about that. But we have made it to the end of the video. We've discussed the 10 books in September and October that I read that I hadn't yet covered with you all. So I'm really happy about that. Going forward, I'm not really sure how I want to handle wrap-ups. In one way, Doing a wrap up every week with what I've read that week would be good because it's fresh in my mind and I can discuss it more easily, more fluently with you, as I've seen some of my fellow booktubers do so well. But I feel like that might put too much pressure on me, and I don't want to do that. So then I think, well, should I do it every single month? Maybe. But really, if I'm covering many of the books I've read in other videos, such as the ones I've mentioned at the beginning of this video, then I don't need to go over them yet again. I can instead spend the time on the books I haven't yet covered. And if I do that, I probably will end up with, 7 to 15 books from 2 months that I can cover all in one go like I did today. Well, we'll see. That might be the way I go. What do you think? More importantly, though, what have you been reading? What have been your favorite books so far this fall? Or maybe, because I think there were several of them in this wrap-up, what have been the strangest but yet most interesting books you've read this fall? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, when I'm planning to do my Mary Stuart wrap-up video, I hope that you continue to enjoy wonderful, fascinating reading in whatever genre you choose.